She was the top student, undeniably brilliant, undefeated in every mock debate, with logic that left even teachers speechless. But when the elite competition list was posted, her name wasn't just missing, it had never even been considered. Behind closed doors, a recording revealed the truth. She's smart, but not the right look for our program. That single sentence, caught on tape, would spark a storm the school couldn't contain. When she leaked the truth, what was meant to silence her became the match that lit an entire institution on fire. And the world would soon ask, why was the best never allowed to win? Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The bell tower of Faircrest Academy rang with the same elegance as the school's mission statement: excellence, legacy, leadership. But what it didn't say was who that excellence was built to serve. Sarai Walker, 17, moved like a shadow through the sun-drenched halls. Shoulders straight, steps measured, eyes focused. Her skin was a rich coffee tone, her curls tightly tied into a neat bun, and her satchel heavy with books she'd already read twice. Her uniform, unlike those of her peers, bore subtle signs of wear, carefully ironed, but fading at the seams. She didn't care. Faircrest wasn't about fashion, it was about the future, and she had come here to build hers brick by brick, word by word. Faircrest was one of the top-ranked prep schools in Boston, gleaming white columns, manicured lawns, and a legacy of students funneled straight into the Ivy League. Nearly everyone around her had a last name with a building or scholarship fund attached. She had none of that. What she had was raw brilliance, discipline, and the unwavering love of a mother who was sacrificing everything. Tamika Walker. Her mother worked 3 jobs: janitor at a downtown law firm, night clerk at the mobile station, an early morning dog walker for families who wouldn't meet her eyes when they handed her leashes. Every dollar she earned went into Sarai's tuition. It wasn't a loan or a favor. It was belief, unspoken, fierce, heavy. And Sarai never forgot it. She never gave them a single excuse to doubt her place. In AP Ethics, she always raised her hand first, her points stitched with moral nuance. In Logic and Rhetoric, she corrected the textbook twice. In every mock trial held in the school's debate program, Sarai won decisively. Her arguments were symphonic, layered, clear, ruthless when they had to be. When others grew emotional or defensive, Sarai stayed surgical, precise, controlled. Everyone noticed, except the one man whose opinion actually counted. Professor Charles Halberd, chair of the Faircrest Debate Council, Yale alumnus, gold cufflinks, British accent he didn't earn, known for sending more students to state and national debate championships than any other coach in Massachusetts. Also known quietly, among certain circles, for something else: never selecting black girls for his elite team. Ever. He'd say things like, "She's strong, but a little too emotional," or "We're looking for someone who matches the school's image," or the most cutting of all, "She's not quite there yet, but give her time." Time, of course, that would run out before any opportunity opened. Sarai had seen it before. She just never expected it to happen to her. Every March, the state debate finalists were announced by email and printed on a gold leaf notice posted outside Halberd's office. That board was sacred, laminated names of the chosen few, accompanied by smiling yearbook photos, and their intended college majors. Sarai walked up to it after school, one afternoon, heart pounding with anticipation. She had dominated every internal trial round. Her GPA was unmatched. Her attendance was flawless. She had spent her weekends helping freshmen understand logical syllogisms, just for practice. And yet the board said, lead team: Claire Davenport, Preston Holbrook, Aiden Wexler. Alternates: Isabel Tran, Marco D'Angelo. Sarai's name wasn't even on the alternates list. She stood there frozen. 10 seconds. 20. 30. The hall was empty. Her ears rang. Claire Davenport had fumbled through her opening speech in the last trial round. Aiden Wexler lost 2 debates back-to-back. Preston had literally asked her to explain the fallacy of false equivalence just last week. She felt something slide inside her. Something not quite anger, not quite disbelief. A sort of cold clarity, like a window finally wiping clean. This wasn't about her performance. It never was. She sat in the back row during the announcement meeting the next day, quiet as always. Halberd leaned on his desk smiling as he congratulated the team, white students grinning with their glossy hair and blazers. Claire clapped her hands like a seal, Sarai listened, eyes narrowed. And let's give an applause, Halberd said, to all the participants this year. It was a tight call. But we have to think about representation. Faircrest is known for polish, consistency, and excellence. That's what this team reflects. Polish, representation, image. Those weren't just words. They were dog whistles. Coded language. She'd heard it before in different settings, different tones. They said you don't fit, but they say it in a way that leaves you no place to argue. After the meeting, Sarai stepped out into the hallway and leaned against the locker. Her mind buzzed, but her face showed nothing. Years at Faircrest had taught her how to mask herself perfectly, and now she would use those same skills to unmask them. She knew this wasn't paranoia. This was a pattern. She thought back. 9th grade, Jamal Harris, outspoken, brilliant, overlooked. 10th grade, Destiny Moore, debate finalist in middle school, left the team without explanation after the first tryout. There were always reasons given: attitude, not coachable, lacked maturity, but they all had one thing in common: black. And unapologetically excellent. Sarai began to gather evidence. She started with archived debate results, trial rounds, evaluations, coaching notes. Most were kept in a shared school server accessible to senior students. She printed everything. She highlighted inconsistencies. She mapped out decisions and traced who got what scores. The pattern was damning. Then came the whispers. "You know he doesn't really like you, right?" a classmate told her in private. "He said you were a little sharp around the edges. I heard he called you aggressively articulate," another said, laughing nervously. "Whatever that means. You should be careful," one whispered. Halberd doesn't like when people question him. Sarai didn't care anymore. She wasn't going to be silent. But she needed proof. Undeniable, unshakable proof. So she got bold. The following Monday, Sarai volunteered to help clean up after a school-wide symposium. Halberd was hosting for the visiting Princeton debate team. She knew he'd stay late in the lounge with staff, decompressing over wine and half-bitten cheese cubes, thinking no students remained in earshot. She positioned herself nearby, head down, phone recording. "I just don't think she's the right face for Faircrest," Halberd said plainly, in that smooth, silky voice he reserved for confidantes. "She's too, she's got the brains, no doubt. But it's the package. Debate is presentation, not just content. We're not trying to make a social statement here." Another teacher laughed. "She'll probably end up somewhere decent, maybe State College or whatever." Halberd chuckled. "She's the type that'll write a furious blog post someday. Just wait." Sarai stood in the shadow of the bookcase, hands shaking, phone pressed against her jacket. There it was. Not bias, not innuendo, but confession. The very sentence that confirmed everything she had felt in her bones for the last 3 years. That no matter how perfect she was, her skin rendered her invisible. The audio crackled as she stopped the recording. She stepped out into the empty hallway, heart pounding, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of truth. She had them, not just in whispers, not just in data sheets, in their own words. And that night, with trembling fingers and a steel heart, Sarai pressed send on an email to the Faircrest School Board, attaching the audio file with no name, no subject line, just the truth. The apartment was small, a third-floor walk-up with cracked plaster and a heater that moaned through the night. But that night, it was silent, eerily so. Sarai sat cross-legged on her bed, laptop open, phone in hand, staring at the voice memo she'd recorded 3 hours earlier. The file was labeled Debate Night Lounge. She hesitated. Her finger hovered over the play button. She had told herself that she only wanted proof, not punishment, that she wanted change, not revenge. But as she stared at the screen, she knew that once she pressed play, she could never unhear whatever was on that recording. She tapped it. Halberd's voice came through, clear, smooth, condescending. "She's articulate, but not the right fit visually." A pause, laughter in the background. Another male voice said, "Visually?" Halberd replied, low and smug. "You know what I mean. The hair, the tone. She's strong, but not polished enough. We need faces that reflect Faircrest's standard." Sarai froze. Her chest tightened. She felt each word crawl up her spine. Another teacher chuckled. "So what? She's too real for the team." Halberd laughed softly. "Let's just say, we don't want to send the wrong message about our program. We're not a diversity project. We're an academic institution. The room on the recording filled with muffled laughter. Sarai's hand went cold around her phone. For a long time she didn't move. The glow of her laptop lit her face, and her reflection stared back, dark eyes, tired, and now trembling with something raw. She had expected bias. She hadn't expected mockery. Her curls, the ones her mother always told her were her crown, had been reduced to a professional liability. Her presence, something she'd worked her entire childhood to shape with precision and intellect, had been rewritten as a wrong message. She pressed stop, then play again. She listened twice, then a third time, each repetition sinking deeper. By the fifth listen, the shock gave way to something else. Resolve, because now she had it. The truth. The kind that burned through the excuses people like Halberd used to hide behind. The kind that could rip through the facade of Faircrest's polished perfection. But evidence meant nothing if it stayed on her phone. She clicked new email. To Faircrest School Board. Subject, blank. Attachment, voice memo. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Should she identify herself? No. Not yet. Not when the same system had buried every complaint that came before. She knew how this worked. Her mother's years of warning about how black women were treated when they dared to challenge power echoed in her mind. They'll call you angry. They'll twist it back on you. So she attached the file anonymously. Her message was only 2 sentences. This recording concerns Professor Halberd's remarks about a Faircrest student. It deserves review. She hit send. The message vanished from her screen with a soft click that sounded louder than thunder. Then came the waiting. For 3 days, Sarai lived in a kind of suspended dread. Every vibration of her phone sent her pulse racing. Every time a teacher looked at her too long, she wondered if they knew. Tamika noticed her silence one morning over breakfast. "Baby, you okay?" she asked, pouring coffee from the chipped carafe she'd bought at Goodwill. "You've been quiet since the weekend." "I'm fine," Sarai said, forcing a smile. "Just school stuff." Her mother studied her face. Tamika could always tell when her daughter was holding something back, but she also knew when to let it rest. "You just remember who you are," she said softly. "Don't let them make you smaller to fit in rooms you outgrew." Sarai nodded. She didn't say that those rooms had locked her out entirely. On the 4th day, an email arrived from the Office of Institutional Integrity. "Thank you for your submission. The board has received your file. Please be advised that our review process ensures fairness and confidentiality. No further correspondence will be issued during the preliminary phase." It was cold, formal, almost automated. But Sarai waited anyway. Weeks passed. The debate team began preparing for regionals. Photos appeared on the school's website. Halberd smiling beside Claire and Preston, their blazers crisp, their faces glowing with privilege. Captions read, "Faircrest leads the state, once again." Sarai felt invisible again. Until one afternoon, she noticed something new. A black sedan parked across from the school, with tinted windows. She thought nothing of it until she saw Halberd step out of the building and lean into the car window, speaking briefly before walking away with a folded letter in his hand. The next morning, Sarai was called to the principal's office. "Miss Walker," said Principal Dr. Remington, adjusting her pearl necklace, "we've received an inquiry regarding a breach of staff privacy. It seems someone sent an audio recording to the board. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Sarai's heart thudded. "No, ma'am." Dr. Remington smiled faintly, but her eyes were sharp. "Well, we take such matters seriously. Professor Halberd is a valued member of this institution. You understand the importance of context, yes?" "I do." "Good," the principal said. "Context can change everything." That word again, context. The convenient shield of the privileged. Sarai left the office, her pulse racing. She could feel it now, the pushback beginning, subtle but heavy. That same afternoon, her name disappeared from the school website's student scholars list, which had featured her essay win last month. When she asked her teacher about it, they mumbled something about layout updates. Her locker was vandalized 2 days later. No slurs, just a sticky note. "You talk too much." It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. And still, she waited for the board's response. It came on a rainy Thursday evening. She was home, sitting beside her mother on the couch, trying to focus on homework while the smell of microwaved dinner filled the small apartment. Her laptop pinged. The email's subject line read, "Resolution of submitted complaint." She clicked. Following review, the board has determined that the recording in question was taken out of context. Professor Halberd's comments were deemed reflective of performance standards, not discriminatory bias. No further action will be taken. We appreciate your concern for institutional integrity. Sarai read it twice, then 3 times. Her vision blurred. Out of context. They had listened. They had heard him say she doesn't look the part. We don't want to send the wrong message. And they still called it performance standards. Her breath hitched. She set the laptop aside. Tamika looked over. What's wrong? Sarai shook her head. Nothing. But her voice broke on the word. She excused herself to her room and shut the door. Inside, she pressed her palms to her temples, shaking. It wasn't just the injustice, it was the validation of it by every layer of authority above him. The quiet complicity dressed in professionalism. She turned her phone face down on her bed and stared at the ceiling until her tears finally came. They hadn't just dismissed her, they had erased her. But grief in Sarai's world had always been a short-lived visitor. Behind the tears, something colder began to form, a resolve harder than before. If the school wouldn't hear her truth, the world would. She sat up, opened her laptop again, and began searching, typing the words former Faircrest students discrimination into Google. At first, nothing. Then, buried deep in an old alumni blog post from 2009, she saw a name, Clarice Jennings, a name tied to a sentence that made her skin prickle. I know what it's like to be the only black girl they never chose. Sarai clicked the link and froze. The blog redirected to a legal firm's website. Clarice Jennings, civil rights attorney, and underneath, a tagline that read, "Some scars don't fade, some become cases." Rain slanted across the Faircrest campus the following Monday, streaking the tall glass windows that framed the debate room. Inside, students rehearsed speeches on ethics and integrity, while the real ethics, the kind that could shake the walls of this institution, were being quietly buried in an office just 2 floors above. Sarai sat at her desk, headphones in, pretending to study. Her stomach twisted as whispers drifted through the classroom like smoke. I heard she tried to get Professor Halberd fired. No way. She's just bitter she didn't make the team. Someone said she recorded him without permission. That's like illegal. The voices blended together, sharp as broken glass. None of them looked at her directly, but she could feel the shift, the glances, the hushed tones, the subtle exclusion that worked like a slow poison. That morning she had received a short letter from the board, printed on Faircrest letterhead and slid into her locker. The review of your submitted material has concluded. The recording was deemed out of context and inadmissible. Professor Halberd's comments did not violate any conduct codes. We consider the matter closed. There was no signature, no name. Just an institution speaking in the passive voice, protecting its own. The words inadmissible and closed sat like stones in her chest. Later that day, she was called into the guidance office. The counselor, Mrs. Patel, smiled too warmly, as though soft tones could disguise sharp intentions. Sarai, she began, folding her hands. I know this has been a stressful time. You're an exceptional student, truly. But sometimes we have to remember that certain battles take energy away from our goals. My goal is fairness, Sarai said quietly. Mrs. Patel sighed. Of course, but you have to think strategically. You don't want to be labeled as confrontational.
That word, it landed like a slap.
Sarai's jaw tightened. You mean angry? I didn't say that, Mrs. Patel replied quickly. But perception matters, dear. Especially when college recommendations are coming up. You wouldn't want to jeopardize your chances over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. That's what they called it now. Sarai stood up. Thank you for your concern, she said evenly. But if integrity is a misunderstanding, then maybe this school needs better comprehension. The counselor blinked, speechless. Sarai walked out before she could find her next rehearsed line. The backlash grew subtle, organized, and suffocating. Her essays suddenly returned with lower grades. Remarks like too assertive in tone, or lacks balance in argument. Classmates stopped inviting her to study groups. One day, her seat in the library was mysteriously taken, and when she tried to sit anyway, the librarian said, "This area is reserved today, dear." It wasn't. It never had been. The next week, her locker jammed shut. Someone had stuffed it with printouts of her old debate scores, circled in red ink. On top of the pile was a note. You'll never belong here. She didn't tell her mother. Tamika already carried too much, the exhaustion in her eyes each night, the quiet hope she hid behind small talk and strong coffee. Sarai couldn't add this weight to her. Not yet. So she held it in. She tried to focus on her classes, but every hallway echoed with avoidance. When she walked past, conversations paused mid-sentence. Claire, who once borrowed Sarai's notes, now whispered and turned away. Even teachers averted their eyes. One afternoon she stayed behind in the debate room, after everyone left. The faint smell of chalk and coffee lingered. On the whiteboard, Halbert had written a quote from Aristotle. Character may almost be called the most effective means of persuasion. The irony made her chest ache. She wiped it off with one swift motion, the eraser squeaking across the board. That's when she heard the door creak open. Halbert stood there, arms crossed, an expression that balanced civility and threat in equal measure. "Still here, Miss Walker?" "Yes," she said flatly. "I wanted to commend you," he said, stepping closer, "for your passion. Not many students care this deeply about fairness. But let me give you some advice." She didn't move. "In life," he continued, "you have to choose your battles. Sometimes being too outspoken can, how do I say this, affect how others see your potential." "Others or you?" she asked quietly. He smiled faintly. "It's a small world, Sarai. College admissions, recommendations, they're all about relationships. I'd hate for a misunderstanding to ruin yours." He left before she could answer. For a long moment she just stood there, gripping the eraser so tightly that chalk dust smeared her fingers white. That night she lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of her bedroom. Outside, sirens echoed faintly from the street below. She could feel the weight of what was happening, not just to her but to every student who had come before her, and walked away defeated. If they thought intimidation would silence her, they didn't understand who they were dealing with. She turned to her laptop again. If the system wouldn't speak for her, she would find someone who could. She started searching Faircrest alumni pages, old newsletters, anything archived from before her time. She typed in every variation of Faircrest discrimination, Faircrest debate exclusion, student complaint. Most results were polished, promotional photos of graduates smiling, banners boasting success. But buried deep in the archives of a forgotten alumni forum, she found something that made her stop breathing. A post dated, "If you're reading this, and you're a student of color at Faircrest, know that what you're feeling isn't new. I tried to fight it once too. My name is Clarice Jennings, class of '99. I know what it's like to be silenced here." The post was brief, almost cryptic. No follow-up, no replies. But at the bottom, a line stood out. "Some of us left, but some of us are still watching." Sarai stared at the screen, her pulse pounding. She copied the name into a search bar. Clarice Jennings, the same name she had seen linked to a civil rights law firm days earlier. Was it the same woman? Could it be? She clicked through the firm's website. The photo was small, an older black woman, with sharp eyes and a knowing smile. The biography listed her specialty as educational discrimination and institutional misconduct. It was her. Without thinking, Sarai drafted an email. "Miss Jennings, my name is Sarai Walker. I'm a student at Faircrest Academy. I think what happened to you may be happening again." Her finger hovered over the send button. She hesitated, wondering if she was ready to pull an adult into her fight. If this was too far. But then she remembered Halbert's smirk, the board's dismissal, the whispered word confrontational. She pressed send. The message whooshed away into the dark digital ether. She leaned back, exhaling, unsure whether she'd done something brave or reckless. An hour later, as she was getting ready for bed, her phone buzzed. A new email. Subject: "I've been waiting for this message for 20 years. Beneath it, one line glowed in the preview text. "You're not the first, Sarai, and you won't be the last, unless we stop him now." The next morning, sunlight spilled through the thin curtains of Sarai's room, but it did nothing to lift the heaviness sitting in her chest. She had barely slept. The email from Clarice Jennings had played in her mind like a broken reel, over and over. "You're not the first, Sarai, and you won't be the last, unless we stop him now." Those words had burned into her thoughts all night. She sat cross-legged on her bed, laptop open, heartbeat thrumming in her ears. Her palms were slick with sweat as she reread the message. Clarice's email continued beneath that single chilling line. "I was once exactly where you are. 17, ambitious and naive enough to think truth would protect me. It didn't. But it can protect you, if you know how to use it." At the bottom was a phone number. Sarai hesitated only a second before dialing. The line clicked. A woman's voice answered, calm but deliberate. Sarai Walker? Yes. This is Clarice Jennings. I'm glad you reached out. Her tone was both warm and sharp, like someone who had spent a lifetime balancing compassion and battle. Ms. Jennings, I read your post from years ago. You said you tried to fight the system. What happened? A pause. Then the sound of an exhale that carried decades. What happened, Clarice said slowly, is that Faircrest happened. And it's still happening. They spoke for nearly an hour. Clarice's story unfolded like a mirror of Sarai's own. Except it took place 25 years earlier. She had been Faircrest's first black female valedictorian. Straight A's, first chair in debate. Accepted into every Ivy League university she applied to. But in her senior year, 1999, she was suddenly cut from the national debate team, without explanation. Helbert? Sarai whispered. He was new then, Clarice said. Only in his early 30s. Charming, articulate, the school's golden boy. Everyone adored him, but he had a type he liked to put forward. Students who looked like they belonged on the brochure. Sarai's heart pounded. What did he say to you? Clarice chuckled bitterly. He said I was too intense. That my passion made the judges uncomfortable. That my presence could shift the tone of the school's brand. Sound familiar? It did. Word for word. I filed a complaint. Clarice continued. Gathered statements, emails, records, everything. I even caught him on tape. But the school board buried it. Told me it was a matter of interpretation. They made me look ungrateful for the opportunity. My scholarship recommendation to Harvard vanished a week later. Vanished? Oh yes. They said it was a clerical error. But by then the damage was done. My family couldn't afford the tuition without that letter. I ended up at a state university, clawing my way through law school. Clarice's voice hardened, and when I finally became an attorney, I swore I'd never let another girl like me be silenced the way I was. Sarai felt a lump in her throat. I don't even know how to fight back. They act like I imagined everything. Clarice's voice softened. Of course they do. Systems like Faircrest are built to make you question your own reality. That's how they survive. But I can help you. I still have my old case file. It's been sitting in a box in my office for 2 decades, collecting dust, but I think it's time someone read it. Can I see it? Clarice hesitated. I'll email you the scans. But Sarai, once you open them, you can't unsee what's in there. You'll understand exactly how deep this goes. The email arrived an hour later. There were 6 attachments, each labeled in clean dated fonts. Complaint. Jennings 1999. Debate selection data. Hilbert evaluation memo. Board response letter. Internal notes HR. Confidential settlement. Agreement. Sarai opened the complaint first. Clarice's handwriting scanned across the page. Fierce and detailed. It described exactly what Sarai had lived through. Unfair selection processes. Coded language about image. The same tone of dismissal. Even the same phrases. Not a good visual fit, too assertive. Not what the donors expect. The second document froze her completely. It was a list of student evaluation scores from 1998. Clarice had the highest marks in every category. Logic, articulation, composure. But beside her name, in the recommendation column, someone had written in all caps, "Not selected, too strong a personality." And next to a white male student with far lower scores, selected polished image. Sarai scrolled faster, pulse hammering. It was all there, decades-old proof. Perfectly preserved. Then she opened the board response file. The letter was nearly identical to the one Sarai had received just weeks ago. Word for word. Even the phrase out of context. Her stomach turned. They used the same letter. She whispered. It wasn't incompetence. It was a template. A system built to recycle injustice and label it as due process. She called Clarice again, voice trembling. They copied your letter. It's the same wording.
I know, Clarice said quietly. They've used that same language for years. It's the shield they hide behind.
Tenure, reputation, tradition. It all means one thing. They protect their own. Sarai swallowed hard. He's still there, still teaching, still doing it.
I know that too, Clarice said, her tone darkening. I've watched his name rise through every article about debate excellence in Massachusetts. I tried to bring it up once to an accreditation board. They told me the statute of limitations had passed.
Then, how do we stop him? Clarice's response was steady, almost cold. You don't wait for the system to care. You make it care. You force light into the cracks. That's the only way. Sarai's silence spoke volumes. She thought of the whispers in the halls, her vandalized locker, the erased accomplishments, all the things designed to break her spirit quietly. I don't even know where to start, she murmured. Start where they think you won't look, Clarice said. When institutions protect bad men, there's usually money involved. Donations, sponsorships. Someone's paying for that silence. That idea rooted itself deep in Sarai's mind. That night, she sat at her desk with her laptop glowing faintly against the dim light of her small lamp. She navigated to the Faircrest Academy website and scrolled through the Development and Donor Relations section. Names filled the page: foundations, trusts, anonymous benefactors. She noticed something curious: a repeating entry titled, "The Halberd Fund for Excellence in Debate," established in. A quick click revealed its description: supporting promising students who represent the Faircrest standard of distinction. Her stomach tightened. That phrase again, the Faircrest standard. She clicked deeper into archived donation records. The fund received annual contributions from a private donor group called the Whitfield Legacy Foundation, known for its historical ties to traditional educational values. She opened their board list: 7 members, 6 of them were alumni from the 1970s and 80s, all white. At the bottom of the page she noticed one more detail: a footnote in small print. The Halberd Fund is allocated directly to the Debate Council, with discretionary oversight by the chair. The chair was Halberd himself. He wasn't just the coach. He controlled the money. Sarai leaned back, realization spreading like wildfire. Every biased selection, every decision justified by image or presentation, it was all tied to funding. The school's prestige, Halberd's reputation, and the donor's comfort were woven into one machine. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Clarice. "Did you find anything?" Sarai's fingers trembled as she typed. "He controls a fund that decides who gets chosen. It's named after him." Clarice replied almost instantly. "Then we have our motive." Sarai stared at the screen, the weight of it pressing on her chest. This wasn't just racism hidden behind politeness. It was institutional corruption disguised as tradition. She felt a sudden chill. The hallway outside her bedroom creaked. The apartment was old, but that sound was distinct, deliberate. She froze, listened. Another creak. Then silence. She got up, walked to the door, and opened it slightly. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the city through the window. But when she turned back, her laptop screen flickered. For a second her open browser refreshed itself. And then the donor records page disappeared.
404 error.
Her heart dropped. She retyped the URL. Nothing. The link was gone. Then her phone buzzed again. Another email. No sender name. No subject. Just one line in the preview. "Stop digging, Miss Walker." Sarai stared at the glowing words, her reflection trembling in the laptop screen. Realizing she wasn't just uncovering a scandal, someone was watching her do it. Sarai didn't sleep that night. Not after the email. Not after watching her browser collapse into an error message. Her laptop sat open beside her, a digital graveyard of links that had been live just hours ago. She stared at the blank screen, her thoughts spinning like a turbine. Someone knew she was searching. Someone was trying to erase the trail, real time. This wasn't paranoia. It was confirmation. And it wasn't just about Halberd anymore. She pulled out a notebook, her fingers moving automatically across the page. She listed every donor name she had seen before the page vanished. Every foundation. Every keyword. Every phrase. At the top she wrote 2 chilling terms she kept seeing over and over: traditional academic lineages, preferred families. Both terms had appeared on donation applications linked to the Whitfield Legacy Foundation, and both were also found in a buried PDF she'd opened before the 4 hours started multiplying. That PDF had been the key. A set of internal fundraising strategy notes, authored by a former Faircrest administrator, dated 2017. It wasn't meant for student eyes. It shouldn't have been on the website at all. The notes detailed how the school could attract continued legacy investments by prioritizing student visibility that reflects the image of excellence our partners expect. Sarai had read those lines again and again. We must avoid drastic deviations from established success profiles. Selection processes should maintain visual and performance consistency with previous debate cohorts. Avoid risk candidates who, while bright, may challenge long-term branding. Branding. Risk candidates. Image. They weren't selecting students. They were curating a marketing brochure, and black girls with natural hair and unmatched scores didn't fit into that photo. Determined not to lose more ground, Sarai backed up everything. Clarice's files, her own screenshots, a copy of the corrupted donor page. She saved it to 3 flash drives. One she hid in her dresser, one in her school locker. The third she slipped into her mother's glove compartment without saying a word. She didn't tell Tamika anything yet. Not until she had something that could hold weight in a room full of skeptics. She needed a document that no board could brush off with phrases like context and oversight. So she dug deeper. Using alumni forums, school archive links, and cached pages, she began cross-referencing the school's debate team selections for the last 15 years, with family donations and board member appointments. Her spreadsheet grew fast, column after column. By week's end, Sarai had built a detailed report 47 pages long. Every donor, every student chosen, every exclusion, every repeat name. There were disturbing patterns. Students from 5 families had appeared on the debate team more than 3 times in 10 years. All white, all from alumni lineages, all from preferred families. In several years, Sarai found notes attached to black or Asian students who placed highest in internal debates, but were passed over. The justifications were vague, still developing, image concerns, not ideal under pressure. Meanwhile, white students with far lower scores were praised for fitting the mold. In a single page from 2014, she found an email from a then board member saying, "We must be mindful of the message we send when selecting representatives. Our donors expect tradition to be upheld." That word again, tradition. It was the school's most weaponized term. By now Sarai's hands trembled not with fear but with focus. She was building a case that no guidance counselor, no board member, and no Professor Halberd could dismiss. But her determination came with consequences. The more she dug, the more isolated she became. Friends she once collaborated with in AP Lit now gave her the cold shoulder. A teacher she respected stopped calling on her in class. She overheard murmurs from staff, words like troublemaker and obsessed. In the hallway, Claire Davenport, one of the debate finalists, muttered just loud enough for Sarai to hear, "Not everything's about race, you know." Sarai didn't flinch. She'd already outgrown their small understanding of the world. One rainy afternoon, as the halls emptied for lunch, Sarai sat alone in the library's back corner, reviewing one of the archived fundraising summaries she'd managed to recover from a school computer lab using cached history. A shadow passed behind her, then paused. A teacher, not one she knew well. Mr. Langston, from the music department. He was quiet, rarely engaged in campus politics, and most students barely noticed him. He said nothing, just slipped a small manila envelope onto her open textbook. She looked up, startled. "What?" He didn't meet her eyes, found that in the copier tray, figured you'd know what to do with it. Then he walked away. The envelope had no address, no sender, just one line written in black ink. Halberd. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were 3 items. A printed memo marked confidential, internal only, dated September. A redacted student evaluation form. A copy of a complaint letter that had never been mailed. The memo was the first thing she read. It was from the then chair of student affairs, discussing Halberd's decision to remove a student, Diane Marsh, a black senior who, like Sarai, had dominated trial rounds and was expected to win regionals that year. Concerns have been raised regarding Mr. Halberd's removal of Miss Marsh, despite her exceptional scores. His justification cites image risk and potential discomfort among traditional donors. There is no written policy supporting these terms. The memo concluded with one damning line. Given Mr. Halberd's influence and funding contributions, the matter will not be pursued. The evaluation form was worse. Dion's scores were outstanding. Perfect marks in articulation, rebuttal, composure. But the notes section had been altered in pen, outside the typed boxes. It read, "Potential PR complications. Consider alternate placement." The final item, the complaint letter, was a draft written by Dion herself, never sent. "I am tired of being praised for my intellect, but punished for my identity. You cannot keep telling us we are brilliant, then push us aside for looking too different from the donor's children." Sarai stared at the papers. Every cell in her body ignited with disbelief and fury. This wasn't a one-off incident. This was a pattern, a carefully disguised, decades-long pipeline that maintained whiteness under the guise of merit. She took a photo of each page, backed them up again, and emailed copies to Clarice. Then she sat back in her chair, the envelope still warm in her lap, and whispered aloud, "They've been doing this longer than I've been alive." Across the library, Mr. Langston was gone. No one had seen him slip in or out. Sarai didn't know how he had access to the documents or why he gave them to her. But now she had more than screenshots. She had paper, physical evidence, from inside the walls. She placed the documents into her binder, zipped it tight, and began drafting her next move. Because if this was war, then she was finally armed. But as she packed up her bag, her phone buzzed with a new anonymous message. "That envelope was never meant to reach you. Stop now, or someone else gets hurt." The warning message glowed on Sarai's phone like a slow pulse of dread. "That envelope was never meant to reach you. Stop now, or someone else gets hurt." The words stared back at her, cold and deliberate. Someone was watching. Someone inside Faircrest knew exactly what she had. She locked her phone, shoved it deep into her backpack, and forced herself to breathe. Her heartbeat hammered in her ears, but she refused to let fear dictate her next move. If anything, the message only confirmed how deep this went. Whoever they were afraid of what she might uncover next. That fear, theirs, became her fuel. The next morning, Sarai arrived at school earlier than usual. The hallways were half empty, still echoing with the hollow quiet before the rush of students. She found an empty seat in the library's back corner, opened the manila envelope again, and re-examined the contents with surgical precision. The papers about Dion Marsh were yellowed with age, but the story they told was clear and devastating. According to the administrative memo, Dion had been expelled just 3 weeks before the 2006 state debate nationals. The official reason? Academic dishonesty. But there was no evidence, no report, no testimony, no hearing record. Only Halberd's signed statement accusing her of using pre-written materials during an extemporaneous rebuttal. Sarai frowned. Debate protocol didn't even allow that accusation to make sense. Extemporaneous sections were open note. Competitors could reference prepared material. The accusation was deliberately crafted to sound damning to anyone who didn't understand the rules. And it had worked. Beneath the memo was a photocopy of a disciplinary form signed by the then head of school, confirming Dion's withdrawal. It wasn't even labeled as an expulsion. It was coded, sanitized, erased from public record. No record of her competitions. No mention in alumni publications. No trace on the debate archives. She turned over the final page and froze. On the back, written faintly in blue ink, was a phone number. The handwriting was rushed, slightly smudged. Beneath it, 2 words, "If she ever asks." Sarai's breath caught. "If whoever asks," she whispered aloud. Her mind ran through possibilities. Clarice, maybe? Or another teacher who had tried to help Dion just like Mr. Langston had helped her. She glanced around the quiet library. No one. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft thump of her heart. She pulled out her phone, snapped photos of every page, and then carefully tucked the originals back into the envelope. She didn't know who was threatening her, but she wasn't giving anyone the chance to make these disappear. Then she texted Clarice. "Sarai, I found documents on a student named Dion Marsh. Expelled." Clarice typing, "Oh my God, I remember her name. She was incredible." Sarai, "You knew her." Clarice, "We met once. She reached out to me before she was removed. I thought she just dropped out. I never knew they expelled her." Sarai, "There's a phone number written on the file. Should I call it?" Clarice, "Not yet. Find out what you can first. There's a reason they buried her name." By lunch, Sarai's anxiety had morphed into grim determination. She opened her laptop in the school library and began searching. Dion Marsh Faircrest Academy. Nothing. Dion Marsh Debate Massachusetts.
Nothing but empty results.
Not even a Facebook account. Not an obituary. Not a LinkedIn. It was as if the girl had been erased from the internet. Sarai sat back, frustrated. Every time she tried a different search variation, the results became stranger. Her browser froze twice, and on the 3rd attempt, a pop-up flashed. Unsecure connection. Unable to verify server identity. Her eyes narrowed. Someone or something was intercepting her searches. She switched to her phone's data network and tried again. This time one result appeared. A scanned article from a local newspaper archived by the Boston Public Library, dated March. The headline read, "Local high school debate star withdraws unexpectedly before state finals." The article was short, sanitized. No reason given for Dion to withdrawal. No quotes from her. No follow-up. Just a generic line. Faircrest Academy declined to comment on private student matters. But one detail stood out. A black and white photo of the debate team, standing in front of the school gates. There was Halberd, looking younger, smug, his arm draped behind a girl with soft curls and eyes that looked painfully familiar. Sarai stared at Dion's photo for a long time. There was something about the expression, a mix of pride and quiet weariness that mirrored the way she felt every day at Faircrest. She downloaded the image, printed it discreetly, and tucked it into her folder. Then, unable to resist any longer, she took out her phone and dialed the number on the back of the paper. The call didn't connect at first. It beeped once, then twice before cutting off. She tried again. This time it rang. Once, twice, 3 times.
Then a click.
A voice answered, low and guarded. Who is this? Sarai hesitated. My name is Sarai Walker. I'm a student at Faircrest. I found some documents about a former student, Diane Marsh. Silence. Then a long, shaky breath. Where did you get that name? It was in a sealed envelope. Someone left it for me. I think she was expelled unfairly. I just need to know what happened. The voice grew quieter, tremoring slightly. You shouldn't be calling this number. Please, Sarai said quickly. I just want to help. She deserves justice. If something happened, a sharp inhale on the other end. You don't understand. They watch everything. That school doesn't just protect reputations. They destroy whoever threatens them. Sarai's stomach dropped. Who is this? But before she could say another word, the line crackled. I'm her sister, the voice whispered. And if you value your life, stop asking questions about Dion Marsh. Click. The line went dead. For several seconds, Sarai just sat there, the phone still pressed against her ear. Her hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped it. She called again, voicemail. She texted the number. No response. The library clock ticked loudly in the silence, every second stretching into an eternity. Dion's sister. That meant Dion was real. She had existed. She'd been erased, but not completely. And now Sarai knew for certain that this wasn't just academic bias. It was cover-up. She stared at the photo she had printed earlier. Dion's faint smile, Halberd's possessive stance beside her. The same man, 2 decades older now, still destroying the same kind of brilliance he feared might eclipse him. Sarai's throat tightened. She felt fury and grief fuse into something sharper purpose. She emailed Clarice again. Sarai, her sister answered, said she was being watched. She sounded terrified. Clarice. Typing. That makes sense. Halberd had powerful friends even then. Some of those donors sit on educational boards. They've kept this quiet for years. Sarai. But why expel her? Why not just ignore her like they did with me? Clarice. Because she didn't stay quiet. She threatened to go public. She said she'd go to the press before nationals. That's when they planted the cheating story. Sarai reread the message, her jaw tightening. So they ruined her before she could speak. She whispered. Exactly, Clarice replied. And now they're scared you'll finish what she started. That night, Sarai spread every piece of evidence across her desk, like a crime board. Photos, memos, emails, and now, Dion's ghost in print. Her lamp flickered once, then steadied. The air in her room felt heavy, as though the walls themselves were absorbing her determination. Somewhere outside, rain began to fall again. It always seemed to rain when she got closer to the truth. She opened a blank document titled The Faircrest Report. This time, she wasn't just collecting facts, she was building an indictment. But just as she started typing, her phone buzzed again. No name. Just an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Hello? A male voice this time. Calm, smooth, familiar. Miss Walker, the voice said. This is Professor Halberd. Her heart stuttered. How did you get my number? I make it my business to stay informed, he said lightly. I've heard you've been spending quite a bit of time in the archives lately, digging into old history. Sarai's throat went dry. I'm just doing research, she said carefully. Research is admirable, Halberd replied, his tone like silk wrapping around a knife. But sometimes, when one looks too deeply into other people's mistakes, one forgets to watch their own steps. There was a long pause. Then he added quietly, You're smart, Sarai. Don't let curiosity make you reckless. Click. The line went dead. She sat frozen, the air sucked out of the room. Halberd knew. He knew she'd been digging into Dion's case. He knew about the envelope. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming against the window pane. Her phone buzzed once more. This time a text, from the same unknown number. You shouldn't be looking into this. Sarai stared at the message, pulse racing, as the lights in her room flickered again, and her laptop screen suddenly went black. The darkness on Sarai's laptop screen was more than a technical glitch. It was a warning. The entire machine had shut off mid-keystroke, killing the first draft of her report in the process. She pressed the power button again. Nothing, not even a flicker. Her fingers shook as she tried the reset shortcut. Still dead. She yanked the power cable from the wall and tried to breathe. The timing wasn't a coincidence. Not after the phone call. Not after the message. She grabbed the flash drive she had backed everything onto, still safe in her pencil case, and slid it into the USB port of her mother's old tablet. When it booted up, she breathed a little easier. The files were still there, for now, but the message from Halberd echoed in her mind. Don't let curiosity make you reckless. He knew, and now she did too. The next morning, school felt different. The air in the hallways was colder, heavier, as if the walls themselves were closing in around her. As she passed groups of students, conversations died mid-sentence. Smiles faded. She was a ghost again, but now not because they couldn't see her. Now it was because they chose not to. At her locker, Sarai noticed something taped to the front. A small folded note. No handwriting, just one word typed in all caps. Enough. She peeled it off, hands trembling. Inside, the paper was blank. No threats, no signature. But the message was clear. Stop now, or something worse comes next. She glanced around. No one was watching. But she knew eyes were on her. Somewhere. She shoved the note into her binder, walked to class, and told herself to keep calm. She couldn't afford to fall apart now. Not when she was closer than ever to exposing the truth. That evening, Sarai waited until her mother was asleep, before calling the number again, the one scribbled on Dion's file. Her fingers hovered above the call button, chest tight. She didn't know why she needed to hear the voice again. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the need for confirmation. Maybe it was just grief, the kind that builds when silence becomes too loud to bear. The call rang twice, then 3 times. Then, just before voicemail, the line clicked. You shouldn't be calling again, the woman whispered. Her voice was the same, tired, cautious, and laced with something older than fear. It sounded like survival. I need to know, Sarai said. Please. What happened to her? There was a pause. Then the woman sighed deeply, as though carrying a weight she'd been waiting to release for years. She was my sister, the voice said. My baby sister. She loved books, chess, debate. She practiced speeches in front of the mirror every night. What happened after she was expelled? They didn't expel her, the woman said bitterly. They crushed her. First they accused her of cheating, then they leaked it to the student body. Her friends dropped her overnight. Teachers stopped making eye contact. She went from top of her class to pariah in less than a week. Sarai said nothing, throat tight. She had a full scholarship lined up at NYU, the voice continued. She lost it. The school told them there were character concerns. They never explained. But the offer disappeared. And the lawsuit? My parents tried. We hired a lawyer. But Faircreft's board is full of attorneys, alumni, donors. They offered a settlement before we even made it to court. Told us they'd protect her privacy in exchange for a sealed agreement. Protect her, Sarai whispered. From what? From them, the woman snapped. Then her voice cracked. They paid us to go away, and we did. We didn't have the money to fight. My mom had a stroke a year later. My dad drank himself into silence. Sarai could barely breathe. And Dion? She stopped speaking, the woman said, voice breaking now. She barely left her room. Then she disappeared for 2 days. We found her in the woods. Alive, but not really. She was never the same after that. They put her in a hospital for exhaustion to avoid saying the word we all knew. What word? Breakdown. The voice cracked. She had a breakdown, Sarai. They took everything from her, and then they left her to disappear. A long silence passed. Then the woman whispered, You sound like her, you know, too smart, too brave, too visible. That scares them. Sarai nodded slowly, eyes filled with unshed tears. But I won't disappear, she said. You'd better not, the woman replied. Because if you do, they win again. Then the line went dead. That night, Sarai sat at her desk for hours, staring at the printout of Dion's face. A photo that once belonged to a celebration now stood as a tombstone. She thought of the settlement, the sealed records, the medical files no one questioned, the way Faircrest had rewritten Dion's story as one of personal failure, never institutional destruction. It wasn't just racism, it was erasure. And Sarai knew now, it wasn't about one girl being wronged, it was about generations being silenced before they could rise. The next day, she walked into school with the same folder she carried every morning. But this time, her binder held a newly printed copy of the Faircrest report, a growing dossier of truth, evidence, patterns, and now, a legacy. At her locker, nothing seemed different. But when she opened it, she froze. Her books were there, her notes were there, but the flash drive she had taped behind the locker wall, the second backup, was gone. In its place, a square of paper, clean, crisp, taped neatly to the inside panel. Enough. Same font, same message, but this time, written in red. Her stomach flipped. They had gotten into her locker, and they knew exactly what to take. She grabbed her things, rushed to the library, and logged into a school computer. She inserted the third flash drive, the one from her mother's glove compartment. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She opened the folder marked Evidence, clicked into faircrestreport.tuck, and watched in horror as the screen went white. Then, corrupt file. Cannot be opened. No, 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 she whispered, ejecting the drive and trying another system. Same error. She pulled out her phone and opened her cloud backup app. It wouldn't connect. She tried again. Nothing. She connected to her home network hotspot. Tried again. Account suspended for policy violation. Her entire report gone. Erased from the cloud. Scrubbed from the flash drives. Her laptop still dead. She had copies of the printouts, but the digital trail, the links, the donor files, the cached pages, was collapsing around her. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. No message. Just an image. A photo. Her walking into school this morning. Taken from a distance. She dropped the phone. Her chest tightened. Her vision blurred. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. They were watching. They were scrubbing her existence clean, just like they did with Dion. Sarai ran to the restroom and locked the stall behind her. She pressed her forehead against the cool metal, trying not to break. Every breath came harder than the last. She reached into her bag and pulled out the one thing they hadn't touched, the envelope from Mr. Langston. Inside were the originals, her last surviving evidence. She held them tight, like a life raft in a storm. She would not disappear. Not like Dion, not like the others. Not this time. As she stepped out of the restroom, heart still pounding, she saw something chilling written on the mirror in red dry erase marker. We warned you. The red ink on the bathroom mirror was already smudging by the time Sarai left the stall. We warned you. She stared at it, the loops in the letters dripping slightly as if written in haste or rage. Her reflection stared back from beneath the crimson scrawl, a haunting mix of fear and resolve. She didn't cry. Not this time. Fear was real, but fear could also be used. Every step they took to silence her only strengthened the case she was building. Every erased file, every anonymous photo, every threat only underscored the truth. This wasn't a story about hurt feelings or misplaced ambition. This was a system deliberately protecting itself by destroying the people who threatened its illusion of perfection. And Sarai Walker had become the latest threat. That night, back at home, she met Clarice over a secure video call. Clarice's office behind her was dim, lined with heavy books and legal files. Her voice was sharper than usual. They wiped your cloud account, she asked, brows raised. Everything, Sarai replied. Even the flash drives. I have one set of originals left. Clarice nodded. Then it's time to escalate. Quiet channels aren't going to protect you anymore. You need light. Loud, public, unignorable light. Sarai hesitated. Like the press? Clarice smiled. Better. We start with a platform that can't be buried in paperwork. One the school can't shut down with a phone call to a friend on the board. She sent over a contact. Lexi Monroe, a viral journalist on TikTok known for exposing elite institutions' dark secrets. Her videos were sharp, fact-based, and impossible to ignore. And more importantly, her audience skewed young students, parents, educators, the very people who applied to schools like Faircrest. She's been following private school discrimination cases for months, Clarice explained. If she runs your story, this doesn't stay in Boston. It goes everywhere. Sarai reached out to Lexi the next morning, with a pseudonym and a brief summary. Elite prep school accused of removing black debate students to protect donor image. I have documents. I was targeted. Within 10 minutes, Lexi responded. I'm listening. Send me what you've got. We'll protect your identity, unless you're ready to go public. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she sent the evidence anyway. The photos of Dion, the funding memos, the evaluation forms with altered notes, the donor keywords, the threats, even the mirror message. All of it. Lexi's response was immediate. This is huge. Lexi's first video went up 48 hours later. It was only 3 minutes long. Tight, compelling, unflinching. She didn't name Sarai. She didn't name Faircrest. But she said enough. Elite prep school in Massachusetts allegedly removed a top-performing black female debater from its team to protect its traditional image. According to internal memos, students from preferred families were prioritized over higher-scoring students of color for over a decade. The clip ended with a single line. If you think this is just one school, think again. The views exploded. 100,000 in 1 hour. 500,000 by the end of the day. 3 million by the weekend. And then came the hashtag DebateGate. It trended nationally. Former students of private schools chimed in with eerily similar stories. Anonymous posts flooded the comments. Same thing happened at my boarding school. No one ever said it out loud. But the message was clear. Black girls are praised for being smart but never selected for the spotlight. I was told I was too intense for Model UN. Guess who replaced me? A trustee's kid who had never won a round. Sarai scrolled through the comments, hands trembling. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel alone. 3 days later, the Faircrest administration released a statement on their website. It was vague, sanitized, and full of empty rhetoric. We are committed to fostering a diverse and inclusive academic environment. While we cannot comment on individual student matters, we take all allegations seriously and will be conducting an internal review of our selection processes. It didn't name Sarai, it didn't name Halberd, but it didn't need to. Everyone who mattered knew who the statement was about. In school, Sarai could feel the shift. Some students avoided her, others whispered. A few teachers started acting overly polite. Their smiles strained, but there were small signs of support too. A nod from a junior she didn't know. A sticky note that appeared on her desk reading simply, I believe you. And then, without warning, the silence broke. Professor Halberd went on the defensive. In a surprise interview with a local conservative radio station, his voice was smug but sharp. We're seeing a pattern where elite education is being attacked by students who feel entitled to positions they haven't earned. This isn't about race, it's about readiness. Some students simply aren't mature enough for the pressure of national competition. When things don't go their way, they resort to online slander. The host asked him directly, Are you saying the allegations are false? Halberd chuckled. I'm saying we've let social media become a substitute for achievement. And frankly, it's damaging to real progress. I never denied any student based on race. But I absolutely uphold standards. And some individuals conflate personal rejection with systemic oppression. That's unfortunate, but predictable. Sarai heard the clip during lunch. She didn't even finish her sandwich. She stormed into an empty study room and slammed the door shut. She sat in silence for a moment, then pulled out her phone and typed, Sarai Walker.
That's my name.
And yes, I'm the girl he's talking about. Let me tell you what really happened. She hit record. Her TikTok video was just under a minute. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She simply told the truth, with quiet, relentless clarity. I was the top-ranked debater in my year. I scored higher than anyone on our team, but I was told I didn't fit the image. I was passed over. Then I found proof that this had been happening for decades. To girls like me. And when I spoke up, I was threatened. My files were deleted. My laptop was destroyed. My locker was broken into. But I'm still here. And I won't be quiet. She ended the video with a photo. Dion and Marsh's debate portrait. The caption, she deserved to be heard. We all do. The video went nuclear. Within 24 hours, it had 12 million views. Celebrities began sharing it. Activists reposted it. Students from across the country began tagging their schools in posts, demanding accountability. Lexi Monroe did a follow-up interview with Sarai, this time with her name on record. Sarai told everything clear, careful, precise. Clarice Jennings stood beside her, in solidarity, in wisdom, in rage. What happened to Sarai isn't new, Clarice said. It's systemic, it's polished, and it's powerful. But we are not powerless anymore. The national media picked it up next. Newspapers ran headlines like, "Elite School Rocked by Racism Scandal. Student Says She Was Too Black for the Brand. DebateGate Ignites National Reckoning on Bias in Academic Competitions." The pressure mounted. Alumni demanded answers. Donors paused contributions. A petition calling for Halberd's resignation hit 100,000 signatures in 2 days. Faircrest tried to contain it, but the damage was spreading, because Sarai had made sure it couldn't be deleted this time. But then came the most unexpected twist.
Halberd didn't apologize. He didn't deny it.
He escalated. In an op-ed published in the Boston Examiner, he wrote, "I have devoted my life to academic excellence. I will not stand by while my name is smeared by a student who weaponizes race for personal gain." Sarai Walker was not selected because she wasn't ready, not because of her skin color. This is character assassination, not justice. Sarai read the piece in silence, each word landing like a slap. Then she looked up at Clarice, her eyes calm. "He just made a fatal mistake," she said. Clarice raised an eyebrow. "Which one?" Sarai's lips curved into something close to a smile. "He put his name on a lie, in print, on record." And just as she said that, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. This time not a threat. It read, "I used to work in his office. I know what he did. I have the original scores. Let's talk." The morning after the Boston Examiner piece dropped, Sarai woke up to her phone buzzing uncontrollably on the nightstand. Dozens of notifications stacked over each other. Twitter mentions, tagged videos, Instagram reposts. She blinked against the blue light, half expecting it to be more support. But then she saw it. The trending headline plastered across every platform. "Professor Halberd speaks out. She misinterpreted mentoring boundaries." Her heart stopped. She tapped the link and watched as his interview played on the screen. Smooth lighting, studio polish, and that calm academic tone he always used when spinning half-truths into virtues. He was sitting in a CNN morning segment, hands folded neatly, a sympathetic smile on his face. "I think we have to be careful," Halberd said, leaning forward slightly, "about how we interpret mentorship. I never treated Sarai Walker unfairly. Quite the opposite. I invested time in her, but sometimes when students are under pressure, emotions get heightened. She may have misread certain boundaries of constructive criticism." The anchor nodded thoughtfully, almost indulgently. "So you're saying this wasn't racial bias?"
Halberd's lips curved into a sorrowful half-smile.
"Absolutely not. I've coached dozens of students of color who thrived under my guidance. But Sarai was
How do I put this? Too intense.
too quick to see malice in discipline. She's bright, incredibly bright. But sometimes bright minds can burn too hot. And when they do, they mistake heat for hostility." Sarai felt the blood drain from her face. He wasn't just denying it. He was rewriting it, turning her pain into pathology. Her mother knocked softly on the door. "Sweetheart, you should see the news." "I already did," Sarai said, voice steady but hollow. Tamika hesitated in the doorway. "He's trying to make you sound unstable. You can't let him do that." Sarai nodded. "I won't." By noon, the intranet had split open. Comment sections on every platform turned into battlefields. Classic case of entitlement. She couldn't handle feedback. "He's gaslighting her in 4K. The man just called her emotional for being humiliated. This is why people don't come forward. They always get labeled aggressive, too intense, too black. We know the code." The words aggressive and too intense began trending under DebateGate. Dissected, ridiculed, reclaimed. Black women posted stories of being called the same thing in offices, classrooms, hospitals. The movement grew beyond Faircrest. But for Sarai, it wasn't just a headline anymore. It was a wound reopening in real time. That afternoon, she met Clarice at her office downtown. The usually composed attorney was fuming. "He just publicly discredited a minor," Clarice said, pacing. "He's trying to bait you into reacting emotionally so he can call you unstable. It's a classic tactic, the angry black girl stereotype wrapped in intellectual language." Sarai sat still, her gaze fixed on the muted TV in the corner. Halberd's face was still plastered there, smirking. "He said I misinterpreted mentorship," she murmured. Like I asked to be humiliated. Like this was a lesson. Clarice stopped pacing. Then teach him one back, in a language he understands. Sarai looked up. Evidence? Clarice nodded. Hard, undeniable, institutional evidence. Within 24 hours, alumni started sending in messages. Emails flooded Sarai's inbox. Some anonymous, others bold enough to attach names and graduation years. He told me I was too urban for public debate rounds. He said my accent was a disadvantage for Ivy League judging panels. He told my parents I should stick to support roles. The stories came from across decades. Former students who had carried the same shame quietly, now finding strength in Sarai's defiance. Clarice began cataloging them, verifying details, building what she called a pattern of prejudice. It was more than a list. It was a lineage of buried voices. Still, Halberd didn't back down. He doubled down. That weekend, he released another statement through his attorney, painting himself as the victim of a digital witch hunt. He said his reputation was being smeared by emotional activism. And then came the sentence that set the internet ablaze. I never discriminated against Sarai Walker. I disciplined her, as I would any student, when her ambition turned combative. The unfortunate truth is, she became increasingly aggressive and disruptive. That word, aggressive, cut through the noise like a blade. Within hours, aggressive while black began trending. Women in academia, politics, and law shared their own stories of being labeled that way when challenging authority. One tweet read, "When a white man is assertive, he's decisive. When a black woman is assertive, she's aggressive." Sarai's story is all of ours. Sarai saw it all unfolding on her phone. But for once, she didn't scroll endlessly. She closed the app, opened her laptop, and started typing her response. Her video response went up that night. No fancy edits. No dramatic lighting. Just Sarai, sitting by her desk, eyes tired but resolute. "He called me aggressive," she said quietly. "And maybe I am, aggressive in my pursuit of fairness, aggressive in refusing to be silent, aggressive in believing that students who look like me deserve the same opportunities as anyone else. If that's aggression, then I'll wear it proudly." She paused, her gaze steady. "But let's be clear. This isn't about a disagreement. This is about a man who used his power to decide who looked right enough to represent excellence, and who didn't. He can spin it however he wants, but the facts don't change." The video hit 10 million views overnight. Every outlet replayed her words. Even networks that had ignored the story began covering it. Her composure, calm, deliberate, unwavering, contrasted so sharply with Halberd's smug self-defense that it flipped public perception completely. By Monday, the school's PR department was in chaos. Donors began pulling out. One sponsor for the Halberd Fund quietly withdrew a 6-figure contribution. But the biggest shock came 2 days later. Clarice called Sarai after midnight. "You might want to sit down for this." Sarai's stomach nodded. What happened? An email just came in from one of Halberd's former students. White, class of 2021. "He says he has something we need to see." "Who?" Clarice's voice dropped lower. "Preston Holbrook." Sarai froze. That name, it was one of the 3 students who had been chosen over her for the state debate team. "What does he want?" "He says he was told to lie during the internal evaluations," Clarice said. "That Halberd made him sign off on false score sheets claiming you lost points for emotional instability." Sarai's chest tightened. "You mean—" "Yes," Clarice interrupted. "He rigged the selections. He didn't just ignore you. He falsified your results." The silence that followed felt electric, sharp, disbelieving, alive. Sarai finally whispered, "He didn't just call me aggressive. He made me look unstable on paper." Clarice exhaled slowly. "And now, we can prove it." As Sarai stared at her phone, a new email notification appeared. From an unknown address with the subject line, "You think you've won? Check your grades tomorrow." The email came at dawn. Sarai had barely slept. Her phone had been vibrating through the night with comments, mentions, and notifications that felt less like validation and more like a siren she couldn't silence. When she finally opened her eyes, the first thing she saw on her cracked phone screen wasn't another trending tag. It was Preston Holbrook's name. Subject: proof. Attachment: Halberd internal emails. She sat up instantly, her pulse quickening. Preston, the boy who had smiled awkwardly when the debate team roster went up. The one who couldn't meet her eyes afterward. For months, she'd thought of him as another cog in the machine. Maybe he had, but now, Maybe he was about to help dismantle it. Her hands trembled as she opened the message. Sarai, I can't undo what I did, but I can give you the truth. Halberd made us lie. He said your performance sheets needed adjustment for consistency. He told us if anyone asked, we were to say you broke decorum. I didn't understand at the time, but I do now. I'm sorry. Beneath it was a folder of screenshots and email chains between Halberd and senior faculty. Subject lines like team image coordination and debate candidate alignment. Sarai clicked the first one. From C. Halberd, Ed Faircrest, to Mev Watkins at Faircrest. Her scores were high, yes, but that's not the only metric that matters. Optics, demeanor, and audience relatability count too. Let's make adjustments before submission. Replace her emotional score with a 7. We'll justify it as composure under feedback. Sarai scrolled down further, reading line after line of subtle corruption. Another email chilled her completely. If we let one exception slip through, we set a precedent. The donors pay for legacy consistency. Let's not disrupt the brand over misplaced activism. She slammed her laptop shut, chest tight. The proof was there. Undeniable, cold and damning. But it wasn't victory she felt. It was fury tangled with grief. Because she had been right all along. And being right hadn't saved her. It had destroyed her peace. Clarice's office later that morning felt like the eye of a storm. Papers were spread across her desk, 2 screens glowing with legal documents. Sarai sat opposite her, fingers twisting nervously. This is more than enough, Clarice said, scanning the emails. He didn't just lie, he manipulated official records. That's academic fraud. And if those donor messages get out, the school's entire funding chain could collapse. Sarai swallowed hard. He said I was too emotional. He said I imagined it all. And he knew this was sitting in his inbox the whole time. Clarice looked up. They always know. They just count on you being too scared to prove it. Sarai nodded, staring at the floor. Listen, Clarice continued. Once we file this, it's public. There's no turning back. The media will circle. They'll dig into you, your mother, your past. You'll be dissected, defended, and demonized, sometimes in the same breath. Are you ready for that? Sarai thought about the girl in the bathroom mirror, staring at red letters that read, "We warned you." She thought about Dion Marsh's ghost, what silence had cost her. I'm ready, she said quietly. The story broke within hours. Boston Globe. Internal emails reveal racial bias in Faircrest debate team selections. NBC. Faircrest professor under investigation for score manipulation scandal. DebateGate shot back into the trending charts. But this time with a different energy. One of vindication. Former students flooded social media with messages of support. Others shared new stories of their own. Small injustices that together painted a portrait of a pattern too large to ignore. And then came the donors. By the end of the week, 3 major contributors, the Whitfield Legacy Foundation, the Halberd Fund, and the Greer Scholarship Endowment, issued press statements distancing themselves from the school. One donor called it deeply disappointing. Another said, our commitment to tradition was never meant to perpetuate exclusion. Their money left as quickly as their statements arrived. But with exposure came danger. The hate mail started trickling in by the second day. Anonymous comments, burner accounts, untraceable DMs. Stop playing the race card, you lying brat. You ruined a good man's career. You should have kept your mouth shut. Now you'll learn. Sarai blocked one after another, until the notifications blurred into noise. Then the phone calls began. Unknown numbers. Silent breathing on the other end. She changed her number twice. Each time the calls came back within a day. One voicemail made her blood run cold. You don't deserve to represent Faircrest. People like you never do. Her mother found her sitting on the floor that night, back against her bedroom wall, phone clutched in her hand. Sarai, Tamika whispered, kneeling beside her. Baby, we can leave. You don't have to keep fighting this. Sarai looked up at her, eyes tired but unflinching. If I leave, they win. They'll say I couldn't handle it. They'll turn me into another Dion Marsh. Tamika cupped her daughter's face, voice trembling. You're not Dion, you're my child. And no truth is worth your safety. Sarai held her mother's gaze. Then I'll make it worth something. The next morning, Clarice called with an update that made her sit up straight. The school just announced an emergency board meeting, Clarice said. They've been flooded with donor withdrawals, parent outrage, and teacher resignations. And guess what? What? They've invited you to speak. Sarai's jaw dropped. What do you mean invited? They want your statement on record. The board is cornered. They have to look like they're listening. It's political damage control, but it's also your chance to speak in front of every person who tried to erase you. Sarai fell silent. The idea of facing them, the very people who had ignored her evidence, silenced her complaint, and watched Halberd humiliate her, filled her with dread and strange exhilaration all at once. When? She asked. Tomorrow morning. That night, Sarai wrote her speech by hand. She didn't want to read from a screen. She wanted it to come from somewhere real, unfiltered, unpolished, undeniable. She stayed up past midnight, rewriting lines until her pen dug grooves into the paper. They said I was too emotional. Maybe I am. But if emotion is what it takes to make you see that a pattern of injustice isn't a coincidence, then I'll be emotional. If speaking up makes me aggressive, I'll wear that label. Because silence doesn't protect us. It buries us. She looked at the photo of Dion on her desk, the same one she'd shown the world. Her voice caught for a moment, but she forced herself to keep writing. This isn't just my story, it's hers. It's Clarice's. It's every student who was told to wait their turn while watching it go to someone else's child. We're done waiting. When she finished, she folded the pages carefully and slipped them into her bag. Outside her window, the city was quiet. But beneath that quiet, she felt something shifting. The story had escaped Faircrest. It was no longer contained by walls or corridors. It was in living rooms, newsrooms, classrooms. It was no longer just hers to carry. At dawn, she arrived on campus to find a crowd gathered outside the administration building. Reporters, parents, students, all waiting. The marble pillars of Faircrest Academy gleamed in the early sun, cold and indifferent, as if nothing could stain them. But today, they weren't symbols of prestige. They were evidence. Clarice met her at the steps. You ready? Sarai nodded. More than ever. They walked through the double doors into the boardroom. A long mahogany table, surrounded by portraits of men who looked nothing like her. At the center sat the board chair, flanked by Halberd, pale and tight-jawed, his hands folded neatly like always. Sarai took her seat. She could feel every eye on her. The chair cleared his throat. Miss Walker, thank you for coming. We understand you wish to address the board regarding recent allegations. Sarai smiled faintly. I don't wish. I was invited. A murmur rippled through the room. Halberd's lips twitched, the faintest trace of the same condescension he'd once worn while critiquing her debate openings. Sarai opened her folder. Her hands no longer trembled. Before I begin, she said, voice steady, I'd like to remind you that this meeting is being recorded. So let's make sure the truth finally stays on record this time. But before she could read her first line, a man in a gray suit entered the boardroom, whispered something into the chair's ear, and slid a folder across the table. The chair's face drained of color. He looked up at Sarai. Miss Walker, he said quietly. It appears there's been another development. Something new has come to light. The hum of the overhead lights was the only sound filling the boardroom. As Sarai sat perfectly still at the long mahogany table, every detail of the room screamed old money gold-plated nameplates, portraits of headmasters who all looked like variations of the same man, the faint smell of cedar and expensive polish. She could feel the history pressing against her like weight on her chest. History that had been written by men who never looked like her. And now, she was about to rewrite it. The board chair, an older man with thinning white hair and a careful politician's smile, shuffled through the folder that had just been delivered. He glanced up at Sarai, his composure cracking slightly. Miss Walker, he said, before you begin, it appears there's been a recent submission related to this matter. We'll review it after your statement. Sarai's gaze didn't waver. Then I'll make sure my statement deserves to be heard first. A murmur rippled among the board members. Some avoided her eyes entirely. Others looked curious, perhaps even uneasy. Halberd, seated 3 chairs down, looked like a man trapped between pride and panic. His suit was impeccable as always, but his eyes darted toward the door every few seconds, as if waiting for rescue. Sarai took a breath, unfolded her notes, and began. Good morning, she said, her voice steady. My name is Sarai Walker. I am or was a student at Faircrest Academy. I'm here because for 3 years I was told that excellence was enough, that merit was blind, that if I worked hard, this institution would recognize me for my ability. But that was a lie. The silence deepened. She slid the first document across the table, a printout of Halberd's emails, highlighted in yellow. These are internal communications proving that Professor Charles Halberd falsified student evaluation scores. You'll see where my composure and performance scores were manually reduced to justify my removal from the debate team. She turned to another page. This next file shows donor correspondence. The phrase traditional academic lineages appears 6 times. The phrase image of excellence, 8 times. These words are not neutral. They are coded. They are discriminatory. Halberd shifted in his chair. Miss Walker, you are misinterpreting. She cut him off gently, without raising her voice. Professor, you've said that before. You said I misinterpreted your mentorship. You said I misinterpreted professionalism. You said I was too emotional, too intense, too aggressive. But here, she tapped the paper, your words don't require interpretation, they explain themselves. Clarice, seated in the back of the room as her legal advisor, watched her with quiet pride. She didn't intervene. She didn't need to. Sarai was in full control. Sarai continued. When I submitted a complaint to this board months ago, it was dismissed as out of context. That same phrase was used 20 years ago when another student, Clarice Jennings, filed her complaint, and before that in 2006 when Dion Marsh was expelled under false allegations. She slid Dion's faded file forward. Each of these women was told they were overreacting. Each was told to be quiet for the sake of the school's image. And each of them, like me, was erased. Until now. One of the younger board members, a woman with dark hair and thick glasses, leaned forward slightly. Are you suggesting this is a pattern? Sarai looked her dead in the eye. No. I'm proving it. She turned to the projection screen behind her, clicking a small remote Clarice had lent her. A PowerPoint flickered to life. Names, dates, excerpts, and patterns that painted a picture of systemic exclusion. 1998. Clarice Jennings, top-ranked debater, removed before state finals. 2006. Dion Marsh, accused of cheating, expelled before nationals. 2017. Malik Benson, passed over for scholarship, replaced by donor's son. 2024. Sarai Walker, score manipulation and intimidation. These are not isolated incidents, she said. They are traditions. The room was utterly silent. Even the hum of the lights seemed to fade. Halberd tried to recover, his voice cool but trembling at the edges. Miss Walker, you've clearly been thorough, but Faircrest has a reputation to protect. You're standing here because we gave you the education and tools to succeed, and now you're turning them against us. Doesn't that seem ungrateful? Sarai tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. You didn't give me the tools. I earned them. You just hoped I'd never learn how to use them. A soft gasp rippled through the room. Halberd's face flushed red. You're a child, he hissed under his breath, and you have no idea what kind of forces you are provoking. I know exactly what kind, she replied. The kind that hides behind the word tradition to justify exclusion. The kind that uses politeness as armor. The kind that destroys futures and calls it professionalism. The board chair raised a hand. Let's maintain decorum, please. Sarai nodded, reclaiming her calm. Of course, that's what Faircrest values most, isn't it? Decorum. Image. Appearances. You've built an empire on them, but truth isn't always decorous, and justice rarely looks elegant. She handed out copies of her 47-page dossier, the same report she'd built after sleepless nights and digital erasure. These are the facts, the data, the testimonies. Everything you ignored before, it's all here. You can call me emotional. You can call me young, but you can't call me wrong. For several seconds, no one moved. Papers rustled softly as the board members flipped through the pages. The evidence was airtight. Halberd leaned back, jaw tight. You've gone too far, he muttered. Sarai looked at him for the last time, her voice barely above a whisper. No, Professor. You did. When she finished, she stepped back from the table, her voice soft but steady. I'm not asking for your pity or even your apology. I'm asking for acknowledgement. Because if you can't admit what happened here, then every word in your mission statement, equity, excellence, honor, means nothing. She closed her folder. You can decide today whether Faircrest's legacy is built on lies or courage. Either way, history will record it. Then she sat down. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, alive. The board members exchanged uncertain glances. One of them whispered something inaudible to another. Someone cleared their throat. The clock ticked loud against the wall. Finally the chair spoke, voice tight. Miss Walker, the board will deliberate. Please wait outside. Sarai stood, collected her papers, and turned to leave. But just as she reached the door, she heard a whisper, low, hurried from one of the board members seated closest to the chair. This is bigger than Halberd. She froze. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, about to break. Bigger than Halberd. She turned slightly, meeting the woman's gaze, but the member quickly looked down at her hands. Clarice, waiting by the door, caught Sarai's eye. Did you hear that? Sarai nodded, her pulse quickening. Yes, she said quietly. And I don't think they meant just the debate team. As she stepped into the hallway, a man in a suit she didn't recognize was waiting by the door, holding a sealed folder marked Confidential Board of Trustees Audit, and it had her name printed at the top. The folder in the man's hand felt heavier than paper. Sarai stared at it as if it might bite. Miss Walker? He asked, voice neutral but tinged with urgency. This is for you. She took it slowly. It was sealed in a thick, cream-colored envelope, embossed with the Faircrest Academy crest, but above it something she hadn't seen before. Office of the Independent Trustees Audit, in bold letters. Her name was typed cleanly across the top. Sarai Walker, Student File Review, Special Probe. Clarice stepped closer, her posture tense. What is this? The man didn't answer. He gave a short nod, turned, and walked briskly back down the hallway, vanishing around the corner like he'd never been there. Sarai looked at Clarice. Should I open it? Clarice's jaw tightened. Yes. But not here. They returned to Clarice's office downtown. A quiet space carved into the top floor of a weathered red brick building. The view overlooked Boston's skyline. But neither of them noticed. Sarai slid open the envelope with the edge of her student ID. Inside were 22 pages. Legalese at first. Clauses about oversight, transparency, chain of custody. But as she read deeper, her hands began to tremble. The document was a summary of a 2-month-long internal audit, quietly initiated by an anonymous board member following the leak of Sarai's dossier, and the explosive DebateGate revelations. It detailed patterns decades long, verified, cross-referenced, and devastating. First finding: debate team selections. Over the past 20 years, the audit showed that 87% of students selected for national-level debate competitions were white. Only 3% were black. In nearly every instance where a black student had higher evaluation scores than their white counterparts, image considerations or donor alignment were cited in emails justifying their removal. Sarai turned the page. Second finding: scholarships. Of the school's 10 largest privately funded merit scholarships, 7 required trustee approval, which was almost exclusively granted to students from what internal documents called legacy preferred families. One redacted email from 2015. The Rhodes Family Fund isn't comfortable awarding to students without elite collegiate lineage. Keep the pool clean. Keep the pool clean. Sarai's breath hitched. Clarice whispered. It's every bit as deliberate as we thought. Third finding: college recommendations. The audit exposed that Faircrest had a separate hidden recommendation pipeline coded Track A in internal files for Ivy League applications. Students placed in Track A received direct guidance from administrative liaisons, custom letters of recommendation written by senior staff, and access to interview prep resources. Sarai's name wasn't listed in any Track A record. But students with lower GPAs and fewer extracurriculars, students from legacy families, athletes from specific sports, children of donors, were all listed. Over and over again. One entry read, Stibu, brilliant, but not a good cultural fit for Track A. Has a history of challenging authority. Risk, medium high. Clarice gritted her teeth. They used your advocacy as a reason to lock you out. Sarai didn't speak. She couldn't. Her throat burned. Fourth finding: faculty complicity. The audit named 6 faculty members, including Halberd, who had repeatedly submitted altered evaluations, pushed false narratives of emotional instability, or blocked high-performing students of color from recognition. None of them had faced disciplinary action until Sarai's case forced the board's hand. The documents ended with a list of resignations submitted in the past. Professor Charles Halberd, Chair of Debate; Martha Watkins, Director of Academic Review; Jared Lenton, Head of College Counseling. 3 out of the 6. The others were under internal review pending further investigation. Sarai closed the folder slowly. The weight of it wasn't just institutional. It was personal. It was every missed opportunity, every snub, every "you're great," but it was a machine, and she'd been shoved into its gears. Clarice sat across from her silent for a long moment. Then she said softly, "You've exposed a whole architecture." Sarai looked up. "And still, this only came to light because I pushed. Because I wouldn't disappear." Clarice nodded. "They built it to never be questioned. You questioned it and the whole thing cracked." The next morning, headlines exploded again. Boston Globe, Faircrest audit confirms systemic bias in elite academic tracks. New York Times, legacy, race and silence. The scandal at America's most prestigious prep school. CNN, inside the pipeline, how Track A locked out high-achieving students of color. News vans parked outside the school gates. Parents arrived early for drop-off, looking stunned, some furious. Faculty members walked quickly between buildings, heads down, refusing to answer questions. Students whispered in corners, huddled in groups. Some cried, others cheered. Sarai kept her head high. She walked through the front doors, past the framed mission statement, etched into the marble wall. Faircrest, where character defines success. She wanted to laugh. But instead she entered the front office, requested a visitor badge, and walked into the administrative wing, like someone who had just been made undeniable. In the boardroom, she was told to wait. 10 minutes later, the chair entered with a somber expression and a briefcase. Behind him stood two new faces, state officials. They introduced themselves quickly, investigators from the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Clarice arrived moments later and took her place beside Sarai. The chair cleared his throat. "Miss Walker, effective immediately. The school is cooperating with a state-led formal investigation into academic discrimination, donor influence and structural bias within our admissions and honors programs." Sarai said nothing. Her silence was power now. He continued. "All findings from your documentation, as well as the independent audit, have been submitted to the State Review Board. If necessary, we are prepared to open access to faculty emails and donor correspondence." Clarice leaned forward. "If you hadn't done that already, we'd have subpoenaed them." The chair exhaled. "Yes. Well, we're here now." One of the state officials added, "Miss Walker, we will be requesting your testimony if you're willing to give it." Sarai nodded slowly. "I am." That evening, as the sun set over the Boston skyline, Sarai stood in her bedroom holding her acceptance letter to Columbia University. It had arrived that same morning, weeks ahead of schedule, marked Presidential Scholar nominee. No one had to vouch for her. She earned it herself. The story had reached every corner now. Dozens of schools had issued statements reevaluating their debate selection processes. Other students across the country had begun filing similar reports. Dion Marsh's story was being turned into a podcast episode. Clarice Jennings was preparing a class action lawsuit with 6 former Faircrest students. The dominoes were falling, but Sarai remained grounded. She hadn't done this for headlines. She'd done it so that girls like her wouldn't have to spend their lives wondering if they were the problem. Late that night, her phone buzzed. A message from a private number. "You were never supposed to get this far. But now that you have, be careful. Not everyone wants this system dismantled." Sarai read the message, then deleted it. She wasn't scared anymore. Let them warn her. Let them hide. She had the truth. And the world was finally listening. As she set her phone down and turned off the lamp, a letter slid under her door. No return address. Just a single sentence. He wasn't the only one. The early morning light streamed through the window of Sarai's cramped apartment as she scrolled through her phone. Notifications exploded. Mentions, shares, likes, alerts. The digital world was ablaze with her name. Her story, the hashtag #NotherSpeak, had begun its life the night before, and now lived everywhere. On feeds, in comments, in headlines. She pressed her hand over her heart. The flood of attention felt both exhilarating and terrifying. She had come from silence, from being passed over, erased, dismissed, to being amplified. But amplification brought new risks. Still, she couldn't stop. She wouldn't stop. It started with the documentary. The production company reached out after seeing her TikTok video. Within days, they were on campus, filming her, the empty debate room, the dusty trophies, still bearing the names of students she knew could have been. They spoke with alumni, dug through files, recorded her mother's reflections, and Sarai's own quiet rage. The raw footage of her walking through the halls of Faircrest Academy chimed with echoes of exclusion. In the premiere screening, Sarai sat in the front row among a crowd of students, educators, activists, and donors. When the credits rolled and the lights came up, the applause was lengthy, warm, earnest, sweeping. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Major news shows followed. A morning show in New York interviewed her live. Another broadcaster flew her to Washington, D.C. She answered questions clear, composed, firm. "I was told I was too emotional," she said on live television. "I'm tired of being judged for how I feel rather than what I do." Her voice carried across millions of households. She wasn't just a student telling a story. She had become an emblem of change. The tip of the spear, a face for reforming systemic racism in institutions that claimed neutrality. She looked at the camera and felt something shift inside. The fear was still there, but now it was peripheral to purpose. Meanwhile, the foundation called. An email. Then a phone conversation. They offered her a full scholarship to any college of her choice. No conditions. No strings. Just because your voice matters. Sarai stared at the screen. She thought of her mother. All those years of sacrifice. Of tuition paid with second jobs. Of her mother telling her, "Don't let them make you smaller." With trembling fingers, she accepted. She chose her dream school, Columbia, and typed in a message to her mother. "We made it." The movement grew. Let Her Speak trended for weeks. Students across the country reposted her story, shared their own. Private school alumni revealed hidden biases. Debate teams across states launched reviews of their selection criteria. Universities drafted statements to their boards. Sarai's inbox overflowed with messages. "Thank you for giving voice to something I felt but couldn't name. I was told I didn't fit the image too. You did this for us." She read each one. Some she replied to. Some she just held in her heart. Each message lit a candle in the fight she had ignited. She traveled to the scholarship ceremony in a modest black dress, her mother by her side. Cameras flashed. Reporters asked about her plan. She answered, "I'm going to study public policy, focus on education reform. This isn't over." Her mother held her hand, tears glistening. For once the weight wasn't on her mother's shoulders. It was shared. And Sarai felt for the first time that the future might belong to her. Yet beneath all the triumph, she felt the tremor of caution. She woke in the night, haunted by stolen eyes, deleted files, notes taped to lockers. The thrill of success didn't erase the scars. It magnified them. She knew the institution was wounded. But wounded institutions often bite back. That understanding made her steady. She prepared for storms even as she embraced the sunshine. On a crisp fall morning, a limousine pulled up to a nondescript building in Washington. The driver handed Sarai a white envelope. Inside was an invitation, crisp embossed Office of the President, United States of America. She opened it with shaking fingers. "You are invited to the White House to join a roundtable on student equity in educational competition and access." The words blurred for a moment. The dream of speaking had moved from documentary screen to the very heart of power. She took a breath. The journey that began with silence was now carrying her to the seat where decisions were made. She told her mother quietly over dinner, "Mom, I've been invited to the White House." Tamika's fork paused mid-bite. "This is your moment." Sarai nodded. "It is. But I also know that moment is the beginning of something else." Her mother reached across the table and took her hand. "Make them listen." Sarai squeezed her mother's hand. "I will." She didn't whisper it as a question. It was a promise. That evening, as she packed for the trip, Sarai sat in her room surrounded by mementos. The tape-to-locker note, the crushed flash drive, the printouts, the photo of Dion Marsh on her desk, each item a memory. A reminder. A vow. She zipped up her suitcase, slid the white envelope into her folder, and looked out the window at the city lights. Change was coming. Not just for her, for every girl who thought excellence should matter more than image. As she turned off the lamp and climbed into bed, her phone chimed one last time. A new message, unmarked sender. "Ready for your next step. White House isn't the finish line." The dawn light touched the facade of the old brick building of Faircrest Academy, gently, as though trying to soften the sharp edges of what had happened inside. But inside those halls, nothing felt softer, nothing felt resolved. The nameplate of Professor Charles Halberd still hung outside his former office, but the door was locked and empty. The debate trophies still gleamed, but their meaning had shifted. Halberd's resignation arrived, with a quiet press release that belied the storm beneath the surface. 7 pages, 2 sentences. He stepped down to preserve the institution's integrity. The wording was studied, as though every syllable had been chosen to avoid admitting fault. But the world knew better. The audit, the public record, the flood of testimonies, it all had changed everything. Sarai had watched the announcement on her phone, standing in her mother's kitchen doorway, while Tamika made coffee. Tamika's eyes were tired, but the look she gave Sarai was one of hard-won pride. "You did this," her mother said quietly. They couldn't hide it anymore. Sarai nodded, feeling the weight of what had been achieved, and what remained. A week later, a deposition transcript was leaked. Halberd's voice was eerily calm on paper. The moment that cut through everything was a single sentence. "I was afraid a black girl would outshine my legacy." It wasn't typed in bold, but it hit like thunder. Halberd, the man who claimed neutrality, the man who lectured students on character and excellence, had admitted to fear, not of losing debates, not of weakness, a fear rooted in race, legacy, and image. Sarai read that sentence on her phone during math class, surrounded by chatter and the scratch of pencils. She looked up at the board, at the teacher who went on about integrals, and realized she was not fighting just for herself anymore. Her fight was reshaping narratives. The classroom felt smaller, tighter, but the truth was expanding. Public reaction was swift. Headlines branded Halberd not as a fallen educator but as a symbol of academic gatekeeping, of racial bias cloaked in tradition, of the ways elite institutions maintain power. Alumni magazines posted editorials. Opinion columns ran week after week. One editor wrote, "When the protector of gatekeeping admits fear of a black student, the gates themselves collapse from within." For Sarai, the media attention was surreal. Every time she opened her phone, she saw his name next to hers, his quotes next to her story. She watched one documentary-style segment where someone said, "Halberd resigned, but the system remains." The focus shifted from the individual to the architecture. She realized the man stepping down was only one piece of change. The doors beyond him remained unlocked now. In the weeks that followed, Faircrest's debate program was suspended. The school board announced sweeping reforms: external auditors, public selection criteria, transparency portals. It was the first time the institution had flinched, not just because of one student, but because of a movement. Students who once felt voiceless now had checklists, oversight processes, real consequences. One afternoon, Sarai sat in her college counselor's office at Faircrest, waiting for a meeting arranged by the board. It felt like stepping into the belly of the beast, but with her own armor. The chair of the trustees entered first, followed by Tamika, then Clarice, and finally Halberd. He had changed, less polished. The cufflinks gone, the posture drooped. The man who once commanded rooms now hardly met her gaze. He cleared his throat. "Miss Walker, I owe you an apology." She met his eyes. "I'm listening. For years I believed I was protecting this school's standard," he said quietly, voice shaky. "I made decisions based on image. I overlooked brilliance because of assumptions. I targeted you, not because you lacked, but because I feared you would expose everything I built wasn't mine to guard. I'm sorry." Sarai's jaw tightened. "Your apology means something on paper, but the damage isn't undone." Halberd nodded. "I know." She stood. "Then I'll make sure it isn't forgotten." That moment was the unexpected twist. Not because the apology came, but because Halberd volunteered it. It caught the education world off guard. Most resignations come with silence. Most institutions issue corporate statements, but this confession amplified the conversation, moved it beyond accusations, and into admissions. It changed the narrative from "did this happen" to "it happened. Now what?" Halberd's name became shorthand for everything wrong with elite academic pipelines. Image first, merit second, donor comfort over student ability. Tradition as a wall, not a bridge. Globally, educators discussed it. Professors cited his case in lectures. News segments asked, "How many Halberds are still teaching?" For Sarai, the victory felt jagged. She had torn down one gatekeeper, but she knew the doors ahead were many. The scholarship, the national attention, the White House invitation, but also the threats. The erased files, the locker notes, everything that warned her the fight didn't end with this moment. It began here. A month after the deposition, Sarai returned to Faircrest for one last visit. The ivy-covered columns looked the same, but the halls felt different. Empty chairs in the debate room. A plaque outside the coach's former office noted Halberd's tenure. But nothing about his resignation, nothing about the warnings, nothing about the change. She moved through the room slowly. Her footsteps echoed louder than usual. She passed the trophy case, touched the cool glass, names of past champions who never looked like her. She stood in the hallway where she once stared at the announcement board and saw she had never been listed. That memory still cut. In the library she found Mr. Langston, the teacher who had slipped the Dion envelope to her. He stood quietly by the stacks, eyes shadowed. Sarai nodded to him. He tipped his head slightly in return. No words passed. They didn't need to. The shared history hung in the air. He helped her when no one else did. When she reached the debate room one last time, she paused in the doorway. The lights were off. The room felt empty, but alive. She stood center stage, imagined the speeches she never gave, the podium she never ascended, the prize she never held. A memory and a promise collided inside her. She took out her phone, opened the camera, held it steady. This place tried to bury me, but I'm standing, and I will leave something here so no one else has to wait to be seen. She left the room, closed the door quietly behind her, and walked out into the sunlight. The final twist awaited her. As she reached the front steps, a crowd of reporters were waiting. Mics, cameras, flashes, but one man broke through the line of media. He held a plaque, the newly dedicated Sarai Walker Scholarship for Inclusive Debate Excellence. It was installed outside, where the old donor bricks once stood. He called her name. She accepted the plaque, touched the inscription, and felt the weight of history shift softly beneath her fingertips. She looked up at the building and whispered, "I didn't just want them to see me. I wanted them to change." And in that moment, Halberd's legacy became her statement. His regret became public proof. His resignation became a platform. The institution's silence became her speaking room. As Sarai turned to leave, Tamika by her side, a young black freshman with natural curls and shining eyes, approached her. She handed Sarai a folder and said quietly, "Thank you. This is for you." Sarai opened it and found the debate team tryout scores from this year. All of them had arrows pointing to her name. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the auditorium at Faircrest Academy 1 year later. The seats were filled, graduates in crisp caps and gowns, proud parents, faculty, alumni, and at the front a polished wooden podium stood under a soft spotlight. But the room felt different. Tension replaced tradition. Truth replaced ceremony. The weight of what had been was now charged toward what could be. Sarai Walker stepped into the light. She wore her graduation gown, but beneath it she felt armor forged by injustice, resilience, and the demand for change. Her mother, Tamika, sat in the front row, her eyes bright with a mixture of pride, pain, and the promise of something better. Sarai inhaled, let the air settle in her lungs, and began. "Members of the faculty, trustees, parents, graduates of this remarkable class," she said, voice steady. "Thank you for inviting me back, not as the student who is overlooked, but as the student who refuses to stay invisible." There was a ripple through the audience, some startled, others nodding. She paused, scanning the faces, white and black, young and old, nervous and hopeful. She continued, "When I arrived here 4 years ago, I believed that excellence would be enough, that if I worked harder, stayed quieter, followed every rule, then merit would win. But I was wrong. I was told I wasn't the right fit. I was told I didn't match the image. I was told I was too emotional, too intense, too visible. I believed them once, and then I found the truth." She held up a small stack of papers, the dossier that had rocked the school. She didn't wave them theatrically. She simply placed them where everyone could see. "These are not the stories I made up. They are the stories the school chose to conceal." Her voice rose gently, not in anger but in clarity. "My journey here wasn't about me alone. It was about every young person who was told they belong, but never chosen. It was about those whose names never made the board, whose voices were judged before they were heard. It was about the myth that tradition is neutral, when in fact tradition can be a barrier." She paused and looked at the debate team, old members and new scattered across the stage. "Today I return to you not to accuse, but to invite you to a new tradition, one where expression matters more than image, where passion matters more than polish, where you judge a person's ability to argue, not their ability to fit a mold." The graduates sat straight, some gripping their programs. Many looked moved. Then Sarai told them the twist they hadn't heard yet. When the school said they valued resilience, they meant your ability to endure. When they said leadership, they meant your likeness to them. Change cannot be built on endurance. It must be built on justice. Leadership cannot be built on likeness. It must be built on inclusivity. She announced that Faircrest would retire the Halberd Fund for Excellence in Debate, the very fund that once upheld the old image system, and replace it with a new scholarship, the Sarai Walker Inclusive Debate Fellowship, open to all students regardless of background, selected purely on performance, character, and voice. The audience gasped softly. The trustees nodded, their faces guarded but accepting. She looked directly at the remaining trustees. Legacy is important, but not when it excludes. Let our legacy be bold enough to welcome every voice. Silence. Then applause started, quietly at first, then swelling, cascading through the hall until every stand rose. Every student stood. Black, white, Latino, Asian, diverse faces shimmering in the auditorium's lights. Sarai's eyes found one young black freshman, her face shining with wonder, her posture trembling just slightly. She gave Sarai a small nod, and Sarai nodded back. The applause thundered. Her mother wiped a tear. Graduates cheered. Faculty clapped openly, some reluctantly, some genuinely moved. The change was no longer theoretical. It was audible. After her speech, the debate team captain, a newly appointed student of color, stepped forward. The team announcement followed. New leadership, transparent selection criteria, public scoreboards, no hidden donors dictating decisions. There would be external committee oversight, student representation, and annual public reports. A new era. Sarai stepped off the stage, the spotlight receding behind her. She could feel the weight shifting from her shoulders to the institutions. She could feel the doors she once found locked, now edging open, and she could feel the young freshman waiting. Backstage, Tamika hugged Sarai tightly. For years, Tamika had carried the world so Sarai could soar. Now, she stood beside her daughter. Proud, unburdened. "You changed everything," Tamika whispered. Sarai held her mother's hand. "I only told the truth. The rest changed because others decided it couldn't stay hidden." Which was the unexpected twist. In the end, it wasn't just Sarai who changed. It was the school. The institution that once silenced her now amplified her message. She had taken what they denied her and given it back as a transformation. As the crowd began to thin, Sarai lingered near the exit. She saw teachers chatting, alumni hugging, parents wiping tears. The marble floors reflected her figure, small in the grand hall, but large in the ripple she had created. And then she heard a soft voice behind her. "Because of you," said the young freshman, the black girl with natural curls and bright eyes. "I believe I belong here." Sarai turned. She knelt to match her height. "Welcome," she said. "You belong more than you know." The freshman gripped the folder she had handed Sarai backstage, a folder of tryout scores pointing toward Sarai's name, and nodded. "I'm going to be on that team next year." Sarai smiled, the truth echoing in the young girl's words. The fight hadn't been just for her. It had been for everyone who came after. Sarai stood up, took a deep breath, and walked out into the morning sun. The doors of Faircrest Academy closed behind her softly, but the future she left inside swung wide open. As she walked away, her phone buzzed with a new message. "Next step, national reform. Are you ready? If you've ever been told you don't belong, because of how you look, where you're from, or what they assume you can't do, then you already know Sarai's story isn't rare. It's just finally been heard. Because silence protects systems, but truth disrupts them. Type yes if you believe every voice deserves a stage. Subscribe if this broke your heart, but lit a fire.